Alright, we're live. We're on, at least. Welcome to Khealos' Gaming Table. I'm Khealos. On my channel, I talk about tabletop RPGs, miniature war games, and today we're going to do another Rambling with Khealos video. Managed to get out of the office a little bit earlier, because I'm going to have to go back in at about 11:30 and work overnight. Hopefully it will be done fairly quickly. If not, we've got a 4-hour window blocked out. And more importantly, hopefully I don't bork everything, because I'm going to be the one doing the hands-on work. But looking at it, it looks to be fairly straightforward, and I'm not going to stress about it. So one of the things that I really enjoy with gaming is I'm a GM. I have been for 20, 30 years, maybe longer. Haven't really kept track, and at least with my last group, I was one of the forever DMs. And for those of you not familiar, a forever DM is that poor guy or gal that always gets tasked with running the game. For whatever reason, they're good, they enjoy it, or nobody else wants to do it, so they end up doing it. I don't mind it so much because I am something of a control freak, and I do like engaging my players, to help tell some very interesting, hopefully interesting stories. One of the things that, to avoid that GM burnout, because believe me, after a while there is some burnout, especially, when you're the only one running the game. My gaming group in California, what we ended up doing was rotating out games like every story arc, which was, typically between 3 and 4 weeks, and we played every Saturday. So 1 week or 1 month. Well, actually, when we first started this, we were rotating games every week, and that got very unsatisfying, especially if after, 3 weeks, we come back to the first storyline, and everyone's trying to remember, what was I doing? What were we doing? What was the goal? So I came up with the idea of actually running for a period of 2 to 3 or 4 weeks, depending upon how long it takes to get that particular story arc taken care of. That way, you actually do get some actual character growth, some role-playing in, and you're not constantly having to check and recheck your notes to find out where you were and what's going on. And that certainly helped alleviate a lot of the burnout, and it also gave the players a chance to rotate through the different characters that they have, as opposed to playing the same character every week over and over again. So that works out really well. If you are in a group that has people that do want to GM, I certainly encourage them to give it a try, because it can be very rewarding. If they're a new GM, you just have to remember that you're going to have to be very gentle with them, because one or two bad experiences as a GM, and they might not ever want to do it again. But as a GM, I'm usually fairly forgiving. I do like to let my players get away with some stuff. I'm not going to give away the farm, but if they've got an interesting idea for a story or a character concept, unless it's absolutely world breaking, I don't have any issues with them actually doing it. So I just have to tailor the adventures and their foes around it so that they can, go ahead and have some actual challenges. You just have to be careful. And as I said, being a GM can be very rewarding, especially when you get to that critical point near the end of the night. Something big is going to happen. They know what it is, or they suspect what it is. And when you give the final reveal, and then we'll pick it up next week, and everyone starts throwing dice at you because they want to keep going, it's a great way to keep some of the tension there, and people will be talking about it and asking about it and wanting to see if they can figure out what's going on before the next session. It's one of the things that I like about on Critical Role. Not to pimp it too much, but I'm a very late in life Critical Role fan. But Mercer definitely has a talent for building that tension, and then when it's finally time, towards the end of the night, the players also probably know something like that's going to happen. But when he drops that big reveal, and we'll pick it up next week. Just the general cheering and some of the groans of anguish at having to wait another week. But it's a skill like any other that you have to work on, and the only way to get better at it is to actually do it. GMing, DMing, however you want to call it, it does take practice. Sometimes you're going to have some absolutely fantastic sessions that your players are going to talk about, for years to come. You'll always be, after those particular sessions, you're always going to be trying to grab for that high again. What can you do to top it? What can you do to make the experience that exciting again, to get that rush? And then sometimes you're going to have the crappiest session that you've ever had. It happens. We don't really see it on things like Critical Role, but I'll guarantee that Mercer has crashed and burned more than once, and so have all the other GMs. But like any project, there's some risk involved, and I, for one, have had numerous adventure ideas that I thought were absolutely brilliant in my head, and my head and the real world don't always sync up, and it was pretty bad. A few of them, some definite groaners, and the session that shall not be named. But if you are looking to start GMing, Critical Role is a fun place to watch. But enough people have talked about it, but the Mercer effect is something of a real thing, especially with people that have never played before. They're looking to have their first experience be just like they see on Critical Role. Just as a reminder, all of the people on Critical Role are professional voice actors, which means they've been creating voices, they've been doing improv and other acting things as well, not just voice acting, but they know how to improv a bit more. They also, probably spend a lot of time trying to get into character, since they know that they're going to be streamed and watched by, millions of people every week. So there is that. And in general, I like Critical Role. Mercer's world building is, exceptionally well done. I can't fault him on that. And, some of the things that he's done, I plan to beg, borrow, and steal when I start running again. I know it's cliche, but the whole "how do you want to do this" is just a great option to give your players to finally finish off, the big bad, and make it very descriptive. Let them put it in their words, as opposed to you saying, "Okay, you killed the dragon, boom, it's dead." That's, you can do it that way, but there's a bit more excitement when they get to describe how they finish off that big bad. So, I even started Critical Role after the cartoon. I wasn't sure what I was getting into, to be honest, because a lot of my friends and people online had talked about it, and sure enough, I enjoyed the cartoon and went back and watched Campaign 1. I had read a little bit about it, especially with the drama with, what's his name, Orion. And I could definitely see where his style of playing and cheating, could certainly cause issues with the rest of the group, especially when almost everyone appears to be a bit more honest, especially when they're rolling, natural ones or failing in a check. And, there's always the risk of that player that wants to be the center of attention, that wants to be the, for lack of a better term, the alpha of the group, doing the most damage, doing the most role playing, being the center of attention, being the quote-unquote party leader. And there are different ways to deal with that, but ultimately they parted ways, and the rest was history. I'll be honest though, most of the combats with Critical Role, number one, when I watch Critical Role on YouTube, I will typically put it on 1.5 speed, because I don't have that kind of time to watch the entire thing. And usually if it's like a big fight, I'll go ahead and skip through it, because the combat actually is one of the most, unless it's like the epic reveals or something, most of the combat's pretty boring for me. I actually do watch it for the role playing and the character interactions, because I do find that fairly interesting. And especially watching the cast and the characters actually bond, and you see them evolve and change over the course of a campaign. I personally find that very interesting. So, because, in a lot of aspects, you have two types of players. You have the role player, and that's the one that, tries to be a thespian and get into character, do all the funny voices, whatever the case is. I'm not very good at voices, but I do try to change mine up a little bit depending upon the character or the situation. And then you've got the role players, and they're just there to throw dice and kill things. And most players start as one and then move to the other, and sometimes, they're a combination of the two. And as a game master, you do have to gauge your players and figure out how you're going to balance between those two, because some of the more interesting, going back to Critical Role, some of the more interesting episodes for me were the ones that didn't have any conflict or real combat. It was just the players doing things, getting from point A to point B, exploring a new city, making contacts, things like that. But, your mileage may vary. I'm currently, I did make it through all the way through campaign 1. That was a slog, and I wasn't sure if I was going to do campaign 2. It took me a little while to get used to the new characters, especially after the cartoon, and, getting so invested with Vox Machina. But the Mighty Nine, I'm digging it. I think I'm up to 86 or 87. So currently working my way through that, and depending upon how things are at work, I'll usually put on YouTube in the background. And I don't watch, any of the episodes really. I typically just put it on and listen in the background because I'm working, or I'm painting models, or doing the dishes, or working outside, whatever the case is. But I don't have to necessarily watch. They describe everything well enough, and I'm able to, keep caught up. My biggest issue is when I'm outside or have to step away from my computer or my phone, ads with YouTube, because they'll get into the middle of something, and then all of a sudden, somebody's trying to sell me something. And I've actually been thinking about getting the YouTube Premium, whatever it is, to be able to watch YouTube without having to deal with ads, because, well, I have several streaming services and I enjoy them all for different things. I do find that I actually, in terms of my entertainment time, I watch a hell of a lot more YouTube, whether it's Critical Role, whether I'm watching Mechanical Frog's new video, waiting for Tex Talks Battletech, or Big Red Tech. Whatever the case is, I watch a lot of gaming stuff. And there's a bunch of other, I think they're the DM dudes. Bob the World Builder, Professor Dungeon Master, and several others that I'm probably forgetting because I'm rambling on and not actually looking at a screen. But I do find value in all of them. I don't always agree with their opinions, but it's good to have a different perspective, and it's good to see, how other people think. I like Professor Dungeon Master just great. I follow him on Facebook. I catch almost every video that he puts out. But his hard-on for, grim adventures, I think one of his biggest complaints about the Dungeons and Dragons Honor Among Thieves was, I think he was expecting Conan the Barbarian, and he got, what looked to me like an actual D&D group playing together. Nobody really died. There's plenty of action, lots of fun. But, I can appreciate the grim dark. Conan the Barbarian is a very fun setting, but it's not one I would like to play in or run for very long, because that isn't fun for me. I get the whole, it's not you know, it's all but impossible to kill a player in Dungeons and Dragons, but at the same time, I'm not playing a game or running a game for the epic realism. I mean, if you're complaining about players not dying and then there's dragons in there, you know, this is obviously not real life. And you know, that's just me. Now, for the record, I have no issues killing player characters, especially if they do something dumb. If I put out all the clues and the markers that whatever's going to be in that castle behind that door, whatever it is, and it's a big badass, you know, caution, be warned. And if they do it anyway, I have no issue smacking the hurt down on them. But at the same time, I don't like killing players, you know, if their dice are bad, because let's face it, we've all had those nights where our dice just kill us, or the GM's dice are on fire. You know, there are a lot of different options to, you know, avoid straight out killing a player character. You know, knock them unconscious. You know, they're unconscious, so now the rest of the party has to figure out, do they go after the bad guys, or do they stay and, you know, protect, you know, whoever's fallen? And, you know, that could be some drama as well. As opposed to a TPK, you know, y'all have been knocked unconscious, and you wake up as, you know, the goblins or the orcs or whoever are attaching you to spits, you know, Ewok style from Return of the Jedi, you know, which I always found kind of funny, especially considering, you know, people can be very cruel, especially to animals, but nobody's like sticking a live pig on a spit and cooking it alive. That is, at least I hope they're not doing that. That would just be absolutely traumatic, and if anyone does that, don't ever tell me. But doing it that way gives you the option to heighten some of the drama, because how are they going to escape? How are they going to get their gear back? You know, all of that kind of stuff. As several people say, it's not the GM's job to figure out how the players are going to get out of whatever situation they put themselves into. That's the player's job. And that's where a lot of creativity comes into play as well. And that's another thing that some new GMs need to understand, is that players, no adventure is going to survive contact with your player. And that means you're going to come up with an adventure with all kinds of ideas, some big bads, some monsters, some plot threads, you know, all the stuff that goes into making an adventure. And the players, depending upon how experienced they are going to completely muck up your plans. Guaranteed. Don't punish them for that. Reward them for creativity. I have eaten my crow and enjoyed it when the players have figured out a way to circumvent the big battle that I've put together. An example, I was running a Star Wars game, and basically it was kind of like the movie The Warriors. They had to get from point A to point B, but go through hostile territory. And there were bounties on everyone's head. Everyone was looking out for them. But somebody had the bright idea to basically bribe the local guards, the local security force. You know, the security force that actually was over everything. And I forget the exact details, because this would have been, oh God, what decade is this? Probably in the mid-2000s, maybe the early 2010s. And basically they managed to get a military escort from where they were to the starport to get to their ship and get the hell off the planet. While some GMs would have probably still had the bad guys or the rival gangs or whatever attack, trying to take them down. Nobody wanted to piss off the planetary militia, because the last thing you wanted is to have a crackdown, especially with the Empire potentially coming with the Star Destroyer and, you know, a legion of stormtroopers. Nobody wanted that. And so they cleverly outwitted me and got off the planet. And it happens. And some days, you know, your dice are going to be on fire and you can't miss, and then other days, if you roll more than a 6 on a d20, you're going to call that a win. But you know, some GMs do like to roll their dice out in front of their players. I will on those dramatic rolls, like the big bad is fixing to bring his axe down. This axe could potentially kill, you know, the tank of the party, the barbarian, whoever. I'll pull out that d20, shake it, roll it, and in that instance, yeah, the chips will land where they may. But in general, I use the dice as a guideline because I want exciting and fun adventures. And while some people will say, well, why do you even use dice? I use, you know, if you're going to ignore them, I don't ignore them. I will roll them and see what makes sense to advance the story. That's how I typically do it. You know, if it's a combat, you know, sure, I'll hit somebody, you know, do some damage, but unless it's like at a truly dramatic moment, I might not, you know, kill that player character. However, I do love watching them start going to town and, you know, massacring everything around them. Sometimes that is annoying, especially when they get to the big bad, but, you know, that's where you've got to pace the game, have enough threats, if possible, drain some of their resources so they can't alpha strike, you know, turn one and, you know, do, you know, 200 hit points to your big bad. But that's where getting to know your players and them getting to know your style as well, because, you know, GMs should not be storytellers. You're not telling a story, because if you're telling a story, you're railroading your players. You know the outcome, and, you know, they're just there along for the ride. I will typically have 3 or 4 possible outcomes planned out in my head based upon knowing my players' play styles, figuring out how they're going to do it. There's going to be the option to potentially succeed, and there's always going to be the option for failure. You know, as they say on Mythbusters, failure is always an option. But failure doesn't mean it's the end of the story. Even it can be often a setback, and a setback will often add to some of the drama and make the players work a bit harder, you know, to get back on the right path. And that's where, you know, again, practice figuring out what works for you and what doesn't. Because you can watch Critical Role, you can watch any of the other streaming sessions, you can read all of the D&D books or insert your game of choice here. But until you actually sit down and start running that game, you don't know how it's going to go. And even if you do have a good idea, you know, your players are going to surprise you every time. And that's a good thing, you know, because another skill that a GM needs to have is the ability to pivot and adapt. Because games are rarely on rails, and the players are going to do everything they can to explore and make your life miserable. Whether they're intending to do it or not, that is just one of the jobs of a player. And, you know, this is where you help foster that creativity, give them the ability to do that so that they can grow their characters, so they can get a feel for it. Because I play games and I run games for fun. I live in the real world. I see the horror. I see all of the crap that goes along with it. I don't need that much realism in my fantasy. I want to have some fun. I don't care if there's dragons or floating castles or orc armies. It's all make-believe. And as long as I'm having fun, as long as my players are having fun, I do subscribe to the idea that there's no wrong way to play Dungeons and Dragons or whatever. If you're not having fun, you know, that's where you got to take a look and step back and figure out why. And it's also a good idea if you're a new GM, touch base with your players every few sessions. Find out, are they liking it? Are they not liking it? What would they like to see more of? What would they like to see less of? This allows you to help tailor the sessions to the players. Now, you're not going to make everyone happy. But, and you don't want to cater to, one particular player. It's good to talk with everyone, and then that's one of the tasks, is to also make sure that everyone's engaged. My group in California, one guy, he flat out told us he's there to kill things and to take a nap so that he doesn't have to deal with his kids. He escaped, and oftentimes would wake him up and say, okay, it's time for combat. And he'll pull out his dice, get a sit rep, figure out what's going on, and then, start doing it. And once, the combat's over, he goes back to sleep. Every player is different. Every character should be different, and you have to do what you can to make sure that everyone's having as good a time as you can, and finding out what they like, what they're looking for, what are they looking to get out of this. That all falls into that particular thing. After watching 1.5 seasons of Critical Role, I'm not sure I could do what Mercer does day in and week in and week out. I'd love to think that I could, but that is a lot of work, especially since he does the vast majority of the world building. I'm not even talking about the back end stuff, because they do have a full production team. But people complain saying that Critical Role is scripted or whatever. I don't think it's scripted. I just think that you have a bunch of natural performers and doing what they love in front of a camera, and geeks and nerds and everyone in between are absolutely loving it. And there are probably people that watch Critical Role that will never pick up a set of dice or play it, turn open a book. They're just watching for the stories. But I do have to say, watching Critical Role has certainly reignited my desire to run games again, which is why I'm back to working on my fantasy campaign again, finding old notes, revisiting it, seeing what I liked, seeing what I didn't like, redoing some of the maps, some of the concepts that I had, because one of the things that I did for long-range communication, it's probably been done in other things, but I called it the DMing. Effectively, you go to sleep in a particular area. You really want to be safe, because you're effectively astrally projecting into the dream plane. And then if you know where you're going, you can find it. Crossing over water is very difficult, so it's almost impossible to enter the dream and across like an ocean or a big lake or a sea or something like that. But depending upon how things are, you can go around it. You can meet people in the dreaming, which allowed for very clandestine communications, because unless somebody is actually there in the dreaming following you, it's very difficult to get there. I know, but impossible to watch. Granted, you can't pass notes or equipment or anything, because it's all in a different plane, but I thought it was a cool concept, and so did my players, because we had a spell that somebody could learn, enter dreaming or something like that. Mirrors were another big thing that I did. You could communicate through mirrors as well, and depending upon if you're a powerful enough wizard, sorcerer, magician, insert magic class here, you could actually transport yourself to another mirror that you've established a connection through. And people would often escape through a mirror and then whack the one behind them to prevent pursuit. This is where borrowing ideas from different other stories, other campaigns, things like that, and making it your own. Because I all but guarantee somebody has done the whole communication and then transport through mirrors, but I don't think anyone's got a copyright on it. So I took it and ran with it. And trying to put your own spin on things is also fun, but it can also be time consuming, because there are definitely people that say, I don't want this to be just like that. I want my elves not to be Tolkien elves. I want them to do this or that. So But practice, practice, practice. Don't be afraid of running a game just because you've never done it before. You know, when I first started, there was no internet. There was no, you know, you learned by doing, or you learned by watching, you know, somebody in your own group, you know, doing it. Not to lie, sometimes it was definitely trial by fire. Figuring out things on the fly, and, you know, later on, one of the things that, something that I stood by and still stand by, if there's an issue with the rules, you have 30 seconds to find the relevant section in the book. If you're not able to find it, then we will go ahead and I'll adjudicate the rule, and I'll be consistent with it until, you know, the end of the session. After that, you know, approach me after the session, in between that session and the next session, show me, you know, what did I do wrong, what did I do right, and then, you know, we'll fix it based upon, you know, what was found. But again, you know, in a world of magic where dragons fly and there are unicorns and, you know, anything like that, you can always just chalk it up to magic. You know, the magic fluxed and all of a sudden, you know, something happened, you know, whatever the case is. It's just trying to be consistent with your rulings throughout the session, and definitely avoid trying to play favorites, because nothing gets more annoying when you know the GM is trying to curry favor with somebody and, you know, letting them do whatever the hell they want. And there's a variety of reasons for that, but I'm sure you've run into that, and you may have been on the receiving end of that. But GMing, again, can be very fulfilling, very rewarding, especially when the players start saying, okay, so when are we playing next? You know, we had very regularly set sessions, and then after that, you know, when we were rotating between games, you know, people would ask, okay, you know, when are you running your Star Wars game again? Because, you know, I really want to play that again, or Shadowrun, or whatever the game is. And that is always a good feeling when you do that kind of a job and your players actually want to continue. So, but, you know, just some days you're going to have a fantastic session, and other days you're going to wonder why you did it. Why did you put in the effort to draft and craft this adventure when it goes to hell in a handbasket? Like everything else in life, there's always that risk. Can't guarantee everything. All you can do is try and plan out the little bit that you can and roll with the punches, because they will be a-coming. Your players, if they're good players, will still try and mess with you a little bit, but hopefully not trying to derail the whole thing. There's nothing like the one player that just goes out of their way to be that loner, to be that asshole that wants to do their own thing. Because if you're in a party, there's multiple people there. It's not, you know, the loners. It's not the loner story. I mean, they might have an aspect of it. You know, they might get to have a session in the spotlight, but everyone is there to have fun. Everyone is there to participate, and you want to make sure that as many people are having fun. One of the fun things that I like is when I give a basic idea of what, you know, the campaign's going to be like, you know, give them a little bit of the fluff of the world if it's new, or I'm just unveiling it, and then waiting for some backstories. And I'll be the first to admit, I used to be that guy that, you know, like a 10-page backstory. You know, all this stuff happened to me before I was 15. Why I'm only a first level character and not like an 8th or a 9th level character based upon all the crap that happened to me. You know, why I'm not a basket case, you know, after all of the bad stuff that happened in my childhood. But, you know, I try to condense it down to, you know, a half page, some basics, where I was born, what I did for childhood, my parents, some interesting things that happened. And then I try to leave some plot hooks open so that the GM can craft something and, you know, basically torture my character, you know, with, you know, the missing sister or the lost heirloom, or, you know, I don't like to be the chosen one, or, you know, the lost heir or something like that, but sometimes, you know, you've got somebody that's hunting for you because maybe you are the last of the bloodline of this one particular family, you know, whatever the case is. And leaving it vague gives the GM a chance to figure out something interesting. You know, I guess with the Critical Role in the Vox Machina, Percy, Talos and Jaffe basically, you know, gave Matt a basic backstory of what happened to Percy, and that's where Matt crafted the Briarwoods, you know, an entirely messed up storyline. And that, you know, there's one thing I definitely like about Critical Role is, again, I'm not like totally into the grim dark, but at the same time, it's pretty cool to watch the kid gloves come off, and Matt's not afraid to pull punches or, you know, rip people's hearts out, sometimes in the very literal sense, at least in terms of the game. But if you're planning on running a game, don't wait, do it. Grab a campaign, whether it's Lost Mines of Phandelver, an introductory adventure for another system, get your friends together, get around a table, get on Discord, get on, you know, your platform of choice, and do it. Because you're never going to know if you're good at it until you do it. You don't know if you're going to have fun unless you do it. And chances are you're going to have a lot of fun. And GMs are always in short supply. You know, they keep talking about wanting to put, you know, some sort of AI DM. I'm not sure how that's going to work, but DMs are always going to be in short supply. You know, I was absolutely flabbergasted when I started finding out that there were GMs that get paid to run games. I'm like, you know, I've been doing this for 20, 30 years. You know, typically I got paid in pizza and soda and other snacks. But, you know, to actually get paid to run a game, you know, if I get back into the saddle and I think there's a market for it, hell yeah, I might do that. Is anyone a paid GM? What are your thoughts on it? What are some of your DM styles? Are you grimdark? Do you like to kill people? Do you let the dice flow freely out in front of everyone and let the chips fall? And if they die, they die. Let me know. I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up and head back to the hotel. I'm going to go grab a bite to eat and get some sleep. But hopefully you enjoyed this rambling session. You know, another 2 miles, 1 mile up, 1 mile back. And let me know what you think in the comments below. Let's see if we can get out of the darkness here. But have a great night, and I'll check in hopefully tomorrow.